Let us look at an example of cost volume profit analysis with multiple cost drivers. Indu is a distributor of brass picture frames. For 2015, she plans to purchase frames for €30 each and sell them for €45 each. Indu's fixed costs for 2015 are expected to be €240,000. Now, Indu's only other costs will be variable cost of €60 per shipment for preparing the invoice and delivery documents, organizing the delivery, and following up for collecting accounts receivable. The €60 cost will be incurred each time Indu ships an order of picture frames, regardless of the number of picture frames in the order. So with this information, what we are being asked to find out is, first, suppose Indu sells 40,000 picture frames in 1,000 shipments in 2015. Calculate Indu's 2015 operating income. Second, suppose Indu sells 40,000 picture frames in 800 shipments in 2015. Calculate Indu's 2015 operating income. Now suppose Indu anticipates making 500 shipments in 2015. How many picture frames must Indu sell to break even in 2015? And the last one is calculate another break-even point for 2015 different from the one described in requirement 3 and explain why Indu has multiple break-even points. So this is Indu here, who is buying these frames from the supplier and selling them to the customers. Now for the year 2015, she plans to purchase frames for €30 each. So the cost here of each of these is €30. Now this is the variable cost, which is per picture frame that Indu is buying from the supplier. And then these picture frames are being sold to the customers at a price of €45 each. So this is the selling price per picture frame. Now for 2015, the fixed cost is expected to be €240,000. So the fixed cost is €240,000. And Indu's only other variable cost is €60 per shipment. So per shipment means that every time a load, or you can say it's a truckload, which is shipped from the distributor to the customer. So the truckload may have these 3 frames. So the selling price of these 3 frames is €45 each. The variable cost of each frame is €30 each. But when it is bundled, so this whole bundle may have a variable cost of €60 per shipment. And this is because Indu has to keep employees who are going to prepare the invoice and delivery documents, organize the delivery, and follow up for accounts receivable. So there is a cost associated with the distribution, and that is bundled per shipment, and that is given to us as 60 euro. Now with this information provided to us, we have to find out the operating income and the break even for Indu. So let's see how we can find out this information. So in this example, the information provided to us is the variable cost number one is 30 euros per picture frame. Variable cost number two given to us is 60 euro per shipment, and the shipment may have any number of frames. And the selling price is 45 euros per frame. Now first, what we have to find out is, suppose Indu sells 40,000 picture frames in 1,000 shipments. Calculate Indu's operating income. So suppose Indu sells 40,000 picture frames in 1,000 shipments in the year 2015. Calculate Indu's operating income for the year 2015. So what does this mean? So this means that there are a total of 1,000 shipments, and a total of 40,000 picture frames are being shipped in those 1,000 shipments. So basically, in 1,000 shipments there are 40,000 picture frames. So in one shipment, how many? So cross multiplication, 1 multiplied by 40,000 divided by 1,000 is equal to x. Let's say this is x. So x is equal to, these three zeros get cancelled with these three zeros, so x is equal to 40. So in each shipment there are 40 picture frames, and we have been given that the variable cost number 2 is 60 euro per shipment. That means that for every 40 picture frames, the variable cost number 2 is 60 euros. Now we have also been given the fixed cost, which I have noted here, which is 240,000 euros for the year 2015. So for the first requirement, let's note down the formula for calculating the operating income. So the operating income is nothing but the total revenue minus the total cost. Now total revenue is the multiplication of number of units sold and the unit selling price, and the total cost is the addition of fixed cost and the variable cost. So this is equal to Q multiplied by P minus F plus, now variable cost in our case are 2, that is variable cost 1, which is the cost of buying each frame, and variable cost 2, which is the cost of processing each shipment. So this is V1 plus V2. Now this is Q multiplied by P minus F plus, now V1, let's consider V1 as the cost of buying each frame. So this total variable cost V1 will be equal to the multiplication of the quantity that is being sold and therefore is also being bought, multiplied by the unit variable cost, plus V2, which is the cost per shipment. So this will be the number of shipments, let's say it is N, multiplied by the cost per shipment. So let's say this is small s. So now let's substitute the values. So we know that total of 40,000 picture frames are being sold. So Q is 40,000. So this is 40,000 multiplied by P, which is the unit selling price, which is 45, minus F, which is 240,000, plus Q, which is again 40,000, multiplied by C, which is 30, plus N, which is the number of shipments, which is 1000, multiplied by S, which is the cost per shipment, which is 60. So 40,000 multiplied by 45. So 4 5s are 20 to carry over. 4 4s are 16 plus 2 is 18. And then these 4 zeros minus 240,000 plus 40,000 multiplied by 30. So 4 3s are 12. And then 4 plus 1 5 zeros plus 60 multiplied by 1000. So this is 60,000. And this is equal to 1800000 minus. So let's add these terms in the bracket. So the total comes out to be 1.5 million. So 1,500,000. And this is a 1.8 million. So the difference is 300,000 euros. So this is the operating income if there are 1,000 shipments. Now let's take the second case, which is suppose Indu sells 40,000 picture frames in 800 shipments. That means the number of shipments has gone down. That means the number of frames per shipment has gone up. So if the number of shipments has gone down, then the variable cost number 2 will also go down because it is based on the number of shipments. So if the variable cost has gone down, basically our operating income should increase. So let's find out how much it will increase if we reduce the number of shipments to 800 instead of 1000. So the second part is, suppose Indu sells 40,000 picture frames in 800 shipments in 2015. Calculate Indu's operating income for 2015. So here, as compared to the first part, the number of shipments has reduced to 800, while the number of picture frames is still the same, that is 40,000. So we'll use the same formula that we had used in the previous step. Operating income is equal to Q multiplied by small p minus F plus Q multiplied by small c plus N multiplied by small s. So this is equal to Q, which is 40,000, P, which is 45, F, which is 240,000, plus Q, which is again 40,000, multiplied by C, which is 30, plus N, which is the number of shipments, which is 800, multiplied by S, which is the cost per shipment, which is 60. So this is equal to 40,000 multiplied by 45 is 1.8 million minus 240,000 plus 40,000 multiplied by 30 is 1.2 million plus 800 multiplied by 60, which is 48,000. So this is equal to 1.8 million minus 1.488 million. So this is equal to 312,000 euros. So now the operating income increased from 300,000 euro to 312,000 euro. That is an increment of 12,000 euros, just because we decreased the number of shipments to 800 instead of 1000 as compared to part 1. So basically the cost reduced and therefore the operating income increased. Now let's move to the third requirement. So the third requirement is, suppose Indu anticipates making 500 shipments in 2015. How many picture frames must Indu sell in order to break even in 2015? So there are a total of 500 shipments. That means from the distributor, which is Indu, to the customer, there are 500 times these picture frames are shipped to the customers. Now we don't know how many picture frames are being shipped in each shipment, and that is what we have to find out in order to break even. How many picture frames must Indu sell in 2015? Now we know that break-even point is the point where the total revenue becomes equal to the total cost. So total revenue is nothing but the multiplication of number of units sold and the unit selling price. And total cost is the addition of fixed cost and the variable cost. Now, in our case, we have two variable costs. One is the cost of purchasing these frames, and second is the processing cost for each shipment. So our formula becomes Q multiplied by P is equal to F plus, now V1 is the multiplication of number of units sold and the unit cost, and V2 is the multiplication of number of shipments and the cost per shipment. Now let's substitute the values. So Q is the variable and P is 45, F is 240,000, Q again is the variable, C is 30, N is the number of shipments, which is 500, and S is the cost per shipment, which is 60. So let's solve this for Q. So 45Q is equal to 240,000 plus 30Q plus 6 5s are 30 and then 3 zeros. Or now let's bring all the terms with Q on one side. So 45Q minus 30Q, so plus becomes minus when it goes to the other side, is equal to 240,000 plus 30,000, or 45 minus 30 is 15. So 15Q is equal to 240,000 plus 30,000, which is 270,000, or Q is equal to 270,000 divided by 15. So 15 ones are 15, 15 ones are 15, then 27 minus 15 is 12, so 12 carry over. So we have to divide 120 by 15. So 15 8s are 120. So 8 and then these 3 zeros. So or Q is equal to 18,000 frames. So Indu has to sell 18,000 frames in order to break even with 500 shipments. Now, the point to be noted here is that because there are 500 shipments, there is a certain cost associated with the selling of picture frames. And because there is a certain cost dependent on the number of shipments, the break-even point is also dependent on the number of shipments, because as mentioned earlier, the break-even point is the point at which the total cost has been recovered, and if the cost varies, the break-even point will vary. So with that concept, now let's move to requirement number 4, which is to calculate another break-even point for 2015 different from the one that we have found in this part, which is part 3, and understand why Indu has multiple break-even points. So the fourth part is calculate another break-even point for 2015 different from the one described in requirement 3, and explain why Indu has multiple break-even points. So in requirement number 3, Indu was making 500 shipments, and therefore the break-even point was 18,000 frames. Now in this case, let's take 1,000 shipments. So shipments equal to 1,000, and now let's find out the break-even point for Indu. So as we had seen in the previous step, the formula for break-even point will be Q multiplied by P is equal to F plus Q multiplied by C plus N into S. Let's substitute the values. So Q is unknown, P is 45, F is 240,000, Q is again unknown, C is 30, N is 1000, S is cost per shipment, which is 60. So or 45Q is equal to 240,000 plus 30Q plus 60 multiplied by 1000 is 60,000, or let's bring the terms with Q on one side. So 45Q minus 30Q is equal to 240,000 plus 60,000, or 45 minus 30 is 15. Q is equal to 240,000 plus 60,000 is 300,000, or Q is equal to 300,000 divided by 15. 15 2s are 30, and then the 4 zeros. So or Q is equal to 20,000 frames. So now when we increase the number of shipments to 1,000, the break-even point is coming out to be 20,000 frames. So again, here we have increased the number of shipments, and therefore we have increased the variable cost component of the total cost, and therefore the distributor Indu has to sell more in order to recover the additional cost, and so the break-even point has increased from 18,000 to 20,000 frames. So now why does Indu have multiple break-even points? So Indu here has multiple break-even points because there are two different cost drivers, cost 1 and cost 2, which is quantity of picture frames and the number of shipments. And the various combinations of these two cost drivers will yield different break-even points.